Welcome to the Spool podcast. Unwind with Dr. Nils Roemer, Dean of the Bass School at UT Dallas.
Hi, Aaron. So glad to meet you here. Let me just, before we even introduce you, I came across a quote that I think dates back a couple of years that probably says quite a bit about you, and you will recognize it. Never give up, never settle for anything less. Whatever motivates you to do better in school than in life, use it. I've always been a self-motivated person who never gives up and has gotten me very far. Surround yourself with others who are just as focused. Ultimately, when you are doing the right thing, others will notice and good things will come from it. I mean, that to say that it's inspirational is an understatement. But I think, before I even get to introducing you, I mean, that introduces you. You are very focused, very driven. You've taken on lots of extra challenges along the way. But as of last, I think you're looking back at all of these as really having been the things that really have shaped you. So I really wanted to start with this. So let's maybe back up just a little bit. Dr. Aaron Dotson, a highly accomplished ophthalmologist, who was also an alum of our university. You graduated here in 2015, is that correct?
Yeah, so I majored in neuroscience, and my minor was in music with an emphasis in classical piano and composition. I loved my time at UT Dallas, and I'm grateful that I was able to combine the science part of the brain along with the musical side as well.
So that's really like also quite demanding kind of combination. On the one side, to dabble in Beethoven, so to speak, and perform this, and then on the other side to do neuroscience. So that those are not the easiest of combination. But what struck me was, I think, again, in one of your articles that may have come out, and after you graduated or so, you said something about the fact that these were actually not just, in the afternoon I do this, and in the morning I do that, but that, for example, you were very clear about there being some connection about the kind of eye-hand coordination, the kind of precision, and other things that actually make these things to become far more intertwined than we would otherwise often think. Can you speak a little bit to that? I find that really intriguing, neuroscience, piano, to think of them less as opposite ends, but rather more of things that actually requires, on some level, similar skill sets.
Yeah, absolutely. What I tell people all the time is that music, honestly, is what has kept me sane throughout this long journey of becoming a physician and a surgeon, but it also has helped me to be a better surgeon each and every day. Back when I was at UT Dallas, I was fortunate to have found research in Dr. Sven Kroner's lab where I was able to do rodent neurosurgery. And it was at that point where I realized, maybe I am good at this. Maybe this is a career, something that I can make a career out of. And I feel like my time with practicing music, studying music, all those years really helped out my hand-eye coordination, my dexterity. Even to this day, as an eye surgeon, I try to practice as much as I can. There's not a whole lot of time in my day at this point in time, but that is okay. But I still owe a lot of my surgical skills and technique to all of those years of training in music. In surgery, you have to be creative. Same thing within music. In surgery, you have to be effective. You have to be precise. Same thing within music. So they are very much so connected. And I'm glad that I did not lose that passion and that hobby the further I advanced within my career.
So just so that everyone understands, if we say you minored in music and you play piano, I think you're playing 7 instruments. So you really leaned quite a bit into this. It's not just simply someone doing a little bit on the side to balance himself out. I mean, you don't play 7 instruments just because, right? Would you mind telling us a little bit just about the whole lineup? I mean, you're half an orchestra all by yourself, right?
So I got started with piano about 24 years ago. But when I was in high school, I was really heavily involved within the band. And, I was like, okay, what instruments do you guys have? I love piano, but let's try something different. They're like, okay, we want you to learn the flugelhorn. And then it was this instrument, that instrument. It got to the point where a lot of instruments have similar fingering, like the flutes along with the alto sax, which is similar to the clarinet, where it's like, if I can get sound to come out of an instrument, then I was able to figure out how to play it. So in total, I can play piano, the flutes, guitar, flugelhorn, alto sax, clarinet, and the trumpet. And I'm so blessed with having that musical gift and musical talent, but also with having a family that was very supportive.
Mhm.
I come from a very musical family. My mom and dad, they both are singers. So is my brother. So there was a lot of noise growing up, but they weren't sick of me with all of my practicing when I was in high school and beyond.
No, but I mean, the instruments that you then ultimately adopted, you're right that there's similarities in terms of the finger movements and the likes, but not to forget the breathing, right? I mean, that's big
Oh,
challenge
yes.
to all of that, and I think that kind of coordination of sorts is probably also that keeps you in your, I think you said something that in your new job you really literally change someone's life in like 10, 15 minutes, but it does also require tremendous precision and readiness for that moment. There's no dabbling around when you operate or do something on ice. So I think that's, and again, that breathing aspect of sorts, I think that's also really, really important. But you mentioned already your upbringing, and I think this is always, so how do we become who we are? And I think there's this, very musical family that, as you said, really embraced probably you in all of your opportunities. But there's also like somewhere something to be said that I think you early on shadowed a physician,
That is correct.
right?
Yes. So yeah. So my mom's doctor in internal medicine, his name is Dr. Stuart Gilbert. He was the very first black male physician I had ever met in my entire life. And to me, he was Superman because he was so smart. He was so accomplished, but also very humble. He was a leader in the community. He was also a minister. So as a kid, I would go with my mom to her appointments, and I was such an annoying kid. I was very quiet, but when I was with him, I couldn't stop talking. So I would ask him all these random questions, like, Dr. Gilbert, what are you listening to? What are you looking out for? What does this mean? What does that mean? And it got to the point where it was like, well, Aaron, since you have so many questions, why don't you come and shadow with me and
Shadowing.
learn what it means to be a physician? And ever since I was very, very young, up all throughout high school and even a few times in college as well, he really showed me what it meant to be a healer and what it meant to be a good physician, as well as what it meant to be a good person. Without him and that mentorship, I would not be where I am today. And I still keep up with him. I still call him, text him, give him updates with how life is going. As now I'm the physician, and now I am so grateful that I can do the same thing for a lot of my mentees, which I've done over the year. Over the
I
years, yeah.
think that's probably also really critical. I mean, we often think about physicians about, their smarts, their kind of eye-hand coordination, their abilities. But they also, I think, take on often very important roles of reassuring, first of all. There's a lot of human interaction that has to occur because as a patient, you're like usually, well, you're not at ease. You usually tend to be slightly wary, of what to come. And I think all these other forms of training that you seem to have, benefited from would have probably equipped you very well also for dealing with the very human side of sorts as well. That is probably also really important to your job, right? I mean, just taking care in an emotional way sometimes also of your patients and their respective fears. But let's get this right. So you're shadowing a physician, you're embracing music, you're learning 7 instruments. And then while you're at it at UT Dallas, you also worked as a peer lead team learning leader within the Student Success Center. Following graduation, you invested a year as a research assistant in the Center for Longevity. You served as a freshman mentor and became a chairman of the Committee of Academic Advancement for Black Student Alliance. And so it goes. Was your day just longer than anybody else's, or how does that work?
It's crazy because as a current fellow, so I'm a cornea fellow, which deals with the front part of the eye and everything. And I go throughout my day, and at the end of the day, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired. And I look back to those times when I was in college. I'm like, how on earth did I balance and do all of those things? Because now that I'm older, I'm like, I just want to take a nap after 5 minutes. I led every single leadership opportunity, academic opportunity with passion and with love. And I told myself, Aaron, if you are not happy doing a certain position or job or whatever it may be, then it's not for you. So every single thing that I did when I was in college was definitely with a desire and passion deep inside of me. And I felt like, my days, were they long? They were long at times. But some way, somehow, I was able to get everything figured out. I had a lot of other colleagues around me we were able to help delegate different tasks and different things. But looking back at it, I would not have had it any other way. Those experiences, the jobs, the leadership positions, they made me into the surgeon, clinician, and just person that I am today. And I'm so, so, so grateful for that.
No, I think you did it the perfect way. And I think sometimes, one gets easily, so focused on degree plans and completion that one, doesn't always necessarily see that the other parts are as important in the kind of making of oneself. And that one of the things that we actually have realized is that it is really critical to the success of students that they do many of these quote unquote outside activities, or what we call touching points. So the more they get engaged with student organizations, the more they advocate for something, the more they attend concerts or whatever it is, any kind of activity outside of the classroom actually helps them in the classroom instead of being something that distracts them from. I mean, it depends on what they're doing, but you get the idea. So in lots of ways, doing these extra things is actually really helpful, because obviously as a young man at the time, you were both getting an education and you were becoming yourself as well. And all of that was probably facilitated by this wide range neuroscience studies, minor in music, as well as these various activities. And I think they also say a lot about UT Dallas and the kind of core ideals that we have. We pride ourselves of really being a place that opens up opportunities. You may have recognized that the number, for example, of first-time students that we have these days is really, really high. But therefore, any form of leadership, advocacy, those are really connect with core ideas and ideals of our university and obviously the Bass School. But it would have made for a fairly, long day, as you said. I mean, the funny thing these days is, I don't know, have you ever been back ever since you graduated to campus?
Actually, yeah, I was invited to be a speaker for a few different events throughout the years. And every time I go back, I look left and right and I'm just like, wow, UT Dallas continues to grow.
Right? Yes,
Yeah.
no, exactly. So it's a really dynamic university that continuously changes, which is also very true about our school. Back in the days when you minored in music, you would have done most of your training probably in the Johnson building, which is one of the kind of old beauties of concrete is part of the university is marked by architecturally. If you would have studied with us, let's say in another 2-3 years, you would perform your musical pieces or rehearse them in practices room already of a brand new arts and performance building that is opening up in 27. So our music program is also evolving as well. So that's, I think the interesting side to you having been so much on the STEM side with neuroscience and minoring in music. These days, it's not just the STEM-oriented areas that are growing on campus, but also very much the arts and the performance and so on and so forth, because maybe not to the extent that you did it, but a lot of our students, regardless of where their majors are looking also for opportunities to balance themselves, to find ways to express themselves in music, in performance, and also the ways to which, if music has a beauty that it is not a lonely endeavor. It's something that you most often do jointly with others, and to have that experience, regardless of whether they're in the choir or indeed in band. So tell me, you said, on an off day, you still find time to play the piano. Do you have your favorite pieces that you continue to play, or the pieces that you played throughout your years? Is it a way also to drop back in time as you are sitting again at the piano, remembering other times that you were sitting at a piano? How does it work for you?
Yeah, so even though my days now, they're even busier and longer, I try to find time to practice as much as I can. So I got started, as mentioned, about 24 years ago. Long story short, Christmas Day, my brother, that's his birthday. He got a keyboard for his birthday and he was trying to play When the Saints Go Marching In. He kept on making the same mistakes over and over again. And I'm young and I'm in my head, I was correcting the mistakes and I didn't know that I had this gift of being able to hear sounds, memorize it, and be able to play by ear. So I
Mm-hmm.
played it perfectly the first time. My dad was like, wait a minute, play it again, play it again, Aaron, play it again. And I was able to make my own variations off of, a simple song, and without having a background in music theory, without knowing what I was doing, I was just trying to make sounds that sounded good together. From
Wow.
there, I got into, reading sheet music. I continued to play by ear, and I loved classical music because where I'm from, Inglewood, California, I didn't see other young little Black kids that were playing these big, grandiose pieces. So that's what I gravitated towards. My favorite composers to this day still are Chopin, Rachmaninoff, the composers that come from the Romantic
So you
era,
go for
because
the
there's so
big,
much depth.
where you really reach into this. You're not like going for the quiet. You really want the whole experience, the whole drama, the Rachmaninoff and the beautiful
Yes.
Chopin.
I
Wonderful,
I tell
wonderful.
you.
But it
Yeah.
does sound to me, did you that day when this you said was on Christmas Day, did you guys ever get to unpack your presents, or were you just then eternally stuck that day and playing music and being mesmerized by the experience?
I think I might have been stuck. Honestly, it was such an epiphany. And I mean, with music throughout the years, that was one thing that really connected me with my father. He was a 100% supporter. He has since passed, but I feel like music is still my ability to continue that connection with him, even though he's not physically here. And outside of classical music, I'm starting to get back into music production.
Oh, wow.
In the in the operating room when I'm doing surgery, we are always playing music, and I'm very big on making sure the vibe is right. And so I'm trying to get back into music production and create my own type of unique sound. And yeah.
So you have your own unique playlist that whenever Dr. Dotson comes, they know which button to push, and then it's like, oh, here comes Rachmaninoff again. Let's hope that everyone kind of gets out of the operating room in one piece here, and that nothing too dramatic happens. But
A
one
little
thing
bit.
that we always are interested in is like it just seems in your case that you had a family that was highly supportive and very musical to begin with, so it makes sense for you to have embraced that side, right? And then so if one thinks about your passion for music, in a way it follows quite naturally from your upbringing, from your family. How, again, if you're looking back, I mean, students always wonder, like, how do I make these big life changes? How do I know at the age of 18 or 19 what it is that I want to study? So how does that look? I mean, looking back, it all lines up like pearls of sorts, right? It all music, precision, eye, hand coordination. But was there any other thought that you had in your mind that you wanted, I don't know, to study something, engineering or business, or where was this first encounter of that very first physician so memorable for you that also had inscribed itself very quickly into that's what I want to be?
Yeah, so I knew before going into college that I wanted to study the brain. I thought that the brain and neuroscience was the most interesting part of science to me personally. So as mentioned, I'm from Inglewood, California, and back when I was a lot younger, Inglewood really was not the best place in the world with regards to issues of safety as well as socioeconomic status. There was a lot of drug and alcohol addiction that was plaguing my community right outside my front door. And as a kid, I wanted to learn, how does the brain work on a cellular level to where people have these addictions? And I wanted to figure out, what can I do to learn how to treat that so that I can help better my community as well as other communities locally as well as abroad. So that's how I knew I wanted to study neuroscience. And I know, like, how do I go from California to Dallas, Texas?
Yes.
I have a lot of family in Dallas, Texas, and I looked all over the country, and I saw that UTV has the entire school devoted to behavioral and brain sciences.
That's
and
right.
I said, okay, that must be a great place. Let's consider it. I went for a college tour. I met with so many great people during that time. And I told my mom's like, hey, like, this is a great place. This is where I want to spend the next 4 years. And I do not regret that decision at all.
Let me just, you mentioned the importance of mentorship, and that you to this day both keep up, your connection to some of your mentors, but that you're also in a way of taking on that responsibility of mentorship. And I think that's the other part sometimes that is also important. Is like, obviously, and I started with a quote from you about your self-driven motivation, but with each one of us, I think there are also these incredibly important mentors or encounters or experiences that we've had. And I think you mentioned early on the physician, obviously your parents. Any other mentors that you would have thought that, if they wouldn't have been there, things would have, maybe, been more challenging or turned out in a different way? Or what do you think about these kind of individuals that kind of, one passes through as one progresses in life?
That's a very good question. I like to recommend to people that you really need to have what I call a board of directors throughout your life. And these are multiple people in different career fields at various stages who are able to provide their own perspective to help guide you from point A to point B. When I was at UT Dallas, a few people that meant the absolute world to me were Bruce August, who has since passed on. Rest in peace to him. But he was a rock to our community. He was a voice of reasoning. And without him, many of us would not have finished college. Arthur Gregg was another amazing mentor within the Multicultural Center that I still keep up to with this day. Dr. Courtney Burkeen, who's also within the Department of...
I just saw yesterday. She's an absolute powerhouse, She's the big advocate for student success all around, Very exceptional.
So,
individual.
Yeah. So I had them when I was in college. I developed additional mentors within the medical world afterwards. And I owe it to them because I didn't have any other physicians in my family. I am the only one. So I appreciate those helping to guide my journey. And I do the exact same right now. I've mentored well over 100 students across the country to go into medicine, to go into ophthalmology. And it's something that I plan to continue doing for the rest of my life.
That's maybe, a good way to kind of segue into, we talked about your childhood, about the early inspiration. Now we just talked briefly about the various mentors that you to this day stay in touch with. You obviously graduated, you have your job, you have your career. So however one maps out one's life, you are there, you've done it, right? So what is now, if one goes back to that quote, what is now propelling you forward? What is it, if anything, that you feel like, okay, I've done this, I've done that, that you feel like, okay, now at this point in your life that you feel like, okay, that's important. I want to do more of this. I want to do more of that.
I think that some of the most important things to me to this day still involve education. Just like you mentioned, I was a peer-led team learning leader within the Student Success Center. I love teaching. I love education. And that's why I decided to stay in the field of academics in medicine so that I can teach medical students, residents, and fellows for years to come. I understand that if you teach one person how to do something, or if you teach 5 people, those 5 people will then go teach additional 5 people each, and so on and so on and so on. And that's how you're able to really move the needle. And I feel like through mentorship and education, that's one thing that I definitely want to continue doing. And the other thing is that I'm incredibly passionate about helping out underserved and disadvantaged communities and patients based on my personal background and where I'm from. I get so much joy in my day when I am working at the county hospital, when I'm doing my free clinics, when I'm operating on patients who are in the most of need, because a lot of times the world has unfortunately forgotten about them and they need to have good people who are on their side. My dream in my future is to continue practicing as a surgeon as long as I can. And I want to travel around the world to the ends of the earth to be able to really help change people's lives for the better.
That should still keep you busy for a couple of years. There's enough aspirations and all of that, together with, as you said, returning to music and producing. There's obviously something, that, you value very much about that experience, about the musical education. But you also said already that it kind of also helps you to connect with some moments of your past, and in particular also with your father. And I think that's also a very, very powerful thing about music that we all recognize. I often find that My mother, for example, is a passionate lover of classical music. She never has played, but we historically, when I was a little boy, she took me to the opera, then she took me to the ballet. So for me, encountering any kind of classical music is also kind of a way always of connecting me with that heritage as well. And I think that's also something that is very powerful about music, that we both encounter every time when we hear something, that the last time when we heard it, or the memories of it, as well as we're seeing it again or hearing it again in that moment. So there is really like a very powerful way of kind of connecting us with our past or past experiences, as well as with something very new. So music, traveling to all the last corners of the earth, and then mentoring. So in ways, then it sounds to me as if, the critical parts of who you wanted to become really all came together in your time at UT Dallas, where that combination, neuroscience, music, advocacy, mentorship, all of that were already in place. That's just beautiful to see how formative and really in lots of ways preparing yourself for your life, this whole experience at UT Dallas was. And we just hope that there are many more thousands of students that are going to just go through this and hopefully find in their own unique ways their perfect combination of their studies, their passion, and their kind of opportunity to find their voice and advocate for the things that they feel very passionate about. So thank you so much, Aaron. I know you have important things to do, as you just laid out. We don't want to hold you back so much more. Play some good music over the weekend in case you have some time. And don't be a stranger. We would love to welcome you back to campus, okay?
Thank you so
very
much. It truly is an honor. Thank you.